In this video, we're going to show you to install spark plugs on your Dodge Charger located under your hood. I'm going to start by pulling off the upper engine cover. Just gently pull upward, releasing the rubber grommets from the studs underneath, and set that aside. Just in front of the throttle body here, you're going to locate the temp sensor right here. You're going to locate the little pinch tab, and you want to press on that and disconnect it from the sensor. So there's a little pinch tab right there. You're going to press on and release that. Using an 8mm socket or a flathead screwdriver, go ahead and loosen the clamp holding the intake to the throttle body. Now we're just going to loosen that clamp. Do not go all the way and disconnect it. And we're going to do the same over here by the air filter box. Loosen this clamp. Loosen it, don't unscrew it to the point where it comes undone. Now I want to go ahead and separate the air intake tube from the box here. So just grab that, wiggle it off. Now we can go ahead and remove the whole intake area here. Gently pull upward and then wiggle that off. You're separating the rubber boot here from the throttle body and set that aside. Now here we have the V6 engine. Okay, so now we have 3 ignition coils here, and there's going to be spark plugs underneath. Underneath the intake here, you're going to find the other 3. So we're going to be tackling the coils and plugs on this side here, so we have to remove the upper intake to do so. Now we want to go ahead and separate everything from our throttle body and our intake, so we can go ahead and remove this after. Let's go ahead and separate all of our connectors and hoses off of our throttle body and intake right here. I want to go ahead and release. We had a safety lock right here. Ours is missing. So we're just going to push that little red lock back using our flathead screwdriver. Normally you can just push it with a finger. And once you push that back, you can now push down on this tab and pull that connector off. And use a little pocket screwdriver and slide this little retainer off here like so. If we follow this wire on the back side, this is just a plastic retainer going to the harness we're going to get with our trim tool right here. Same thing as we just popped off. On the side of the throttle body is just a little retainer clip. Just slide that off. And that brings us over here to our map sensor. You're gonna push down on this little tab here. I do find that sometimes it's easier to use our flathead mini pocket screwdriver here. Come on the front side, as well as push down on this tab. And that helps you get that little retainer clip off a little bit easier. Pop that off like so. Pull that harness aside. Now we have a hose right here. You can grab that and kind of twist it off. I like to use my hose pliers and just gently grab that, twist it a little bit to break that seal, twist it and work that up and off. We have another one right here. Use our hose pliers on that one as well. Grab that, just kind of give it a twist to break that seal and go ahead and work that off. On the back side of the intake, down here, we have another hose as well. I'm going to use a pair of hose pliers for that one as well. Try and get that back there. Slide that off like so. And then over here, where the wire harness comes down, there's a little plastic retainer. You can use our trim tool to get behind that and just gently wiggle that off. Sometimes these can be fragile and they can pop off. If you have to, you can always use just a retainer, a wire strap or a tie strap to go ahead and secure that. Now there's a bracket on the back side here that attaches the intake to the back side of the engine here. There's 2 10mm nuts. We're gonna go ahead and loosen and remove those. Now the bracket that we just removed the 10mm nuts from, there's one stud right here just on the edge, and then there's another stud right over there where I'm pointing to. If you follow this bracket down, right here is a 13mm socket we're using. There's a nut down here on a stud. What we're doing is we have to remove this bracket. So let's go ahead and loosen this nut. We'll remove that and we're gonna pull this bracket right off. It's gonna get to a point where that nut's pretty loose in most cases, and you should be able to reach down there and spin that nut off. I put a short extension on the socket here and I'm using my hand to spin that out. It's hard to grab the nut itself, but the nut is just loose enough where the ratchet won't grab it, but it's just too tight where grabbing it with your fingertips won't work. So and it's taking the whole stud right out, not an issue. take the whole thing right out. There it is right there. Go ahead and grab that bracket and pull it up. There is a wire harness attached to the back side of it, but we don't have to remove that. We're gonna set that bracket just to the side. We don't have to separate it from the vehicle. We just need to separate it from the intake area. So that's totally fine where that's resting. I'm gonna use my 10mm gear wrench. Get to the back nut here first. Get that one. Then we'll move to the front one. It's visible right from the oil-filled tube area. It's right behind that. Let's go ahead and set those two nuts aside. We're gonna remove our 7 bolts holding our intake. It's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Use an 8mm socket, an extension. There's no pattern on loosening these here. Now these are generally capture, so they won't normally fall out. So it should be pretty safe to just loosen them all the way. I'm going to gently lift up on the intake. And go ahead and pull that up and out. Now as you lift up that intake, you're going to lift it up and towards the passenger side because there are the 2 brackets over on the driver's side that have studs that come out of the intake that go into this. So if you're trying to lift it straight up, it's gonna bind on that. So lift up gently, pull towards the passenger side, up and out. Our next step is pretty crucial. You wanna make sure that you cover the intake runners here. You don't want anything to fall down inside here. You can use some towels if you want and stuff them in the hole. In our case, we're simply going to cover the ports here with some clean shop rags. Make sure that what you're using is clean. Cover those up. And then we have our insulator pad here. Go ahead and lift up on this here. Pull that away and set it aside. And that has now exposed all of the coils on this side here. Now before we pull our coils out, I can see some dust and debris on the top of the valve cover here, and I don't want any of this to fall down inside the ports where the spark plugs are. You can use a vacuum if you want. We're gonna use some compressed air and just gently clear this off. Don't forget the other side. I'm just using a controlled amount of air. You don't want full blast of pressure. Let's go ahead and remove the coil. Now each one of these here have electrical connectors. It's just a little pinch tab. So let's go ahead and jump to the middle one here, and you're gonna push down. And sometimes you can use a pocket screwdriver and then slide that connector off. Separate that. And then at the other end is a 10mm bolt. Now this here is also a capture, so it won't fall out. Grab that coil, gently lift up and twisting it. Now you're gonna have a rubber boot attached to it. You're separating that from the spark plug. And go ahead and pull it out with the whole boot. Now to access the spark plug, it's gonna be down inside the spark plug tube here. We're gonna use a socket here. It's a spark plug socket, 16mm, and it has a rubber insert on the inside to capture the spark plug. So when you push it on and you loosen it, it'll pull that plug out. We're gonna put that on our extension. Drop that down inside. Get that locked on. I'm just gonna gently loosen that. Got to pull it out, and you can see that the spark plug is captured in there. You have to pull it out of that rubber insert, and there's the rubber insert there. It doesn't always come out of the socket, but there it is. When you remove the spark plug from the box, it will normally have this sleeve on, and that protects the ground strap here on our spark plug. It is pre-gapped from the factory. And take your spark plug here and gently insert it into the rubber boot. That'll be enough. Don't force it in, but just enough to keep that plug from falling out. You don't want to just drop a spark plug down inside, because if you bend that electrode down or the ground strap, you're going to mess up the spark on that, and that's going to cause a drivability issue. So never just drop the spark plug down inside. Gently feed that down, get it caught a couple threads. Once you get that caught, I'm going to go ahead and use a standard 16mm. I'm going to remove the socket with the rubber boot on it. The only reason why I do that is that sometimes that rubber boot will pull off when I go to remove it, and it leaves it stuck down inside the tube, and then you gotta play games to get that out. So I'll just use a standard socket once that's caught. I like to hand tighten that down. Let's go ahead and torque that into position. Now you want to torque these down to 13 foot-pounds. Do not exceed that. There we go. Now on the coil, I like to put just a thin coat of dielectric grease on the outside here just to help it slide down inside, and just a little dab on the inside. You don't want a big glob of it in there, but this does come with a little bit of grease on the inside from the factory. Go ahead and slide this down in a position. Push it on top of that spark plug, and now I want to go ahead and start that 10mm bolt into the valve cover. Now I want to gently snug that down. Once that bolt bottoms out, that's pretty much it. You don't have to go much further. Everything's nice and secure. Grab that coil connection, line that up, push it on. You're gonna feel it in here, it snap into place. Now at this point here, you wanna go ahead and repeat this process for these two, as well as the 3 on the passenger side of that engine. And once those are all done, we can go ahead and install our intake. Install your insulator pad. Before we install the intake, let's go ahead and flip it. And we have our 6 ports here. I'm gonna use a clean towel. You can use a shop rag. Take a little bit of solvent, and I just wanna clean these ports. You wanna definitely go ahead and inspect the intake to look for any sort of damage. Everything looks perfect here, nice and smooth. It's pretty much all we need to do to prepare to install our upper intake. We do want to go ahead and double check the gaskets on the engine itself, so let's go ahead and do that next. Let's remove our shop rags here. Now right here, or on each port, you have a gasket. Now this is a rubber style gasket. These are reusable. Now what you want to do is, I like to run my finger across the edge. You want to feel and make sure that the rubber gasket is raised higher than the plastic lower plenum here, or the lower intake. Now if these gaskets feel flat, or at least flush with the plastic itself, you do want to go ahead and replace these, and you can replace them just by pulling them up and inserting new ones. Just inspect the gaskets, make sure everything is good, make sure they're free of any sort of dust or dirt. Now we can go ahead and grab our intake. We have our intake here. Here are the 2 studs. These are the 2 studs here that are going to insert onto the brackets on the driver's side. So we're going to take our intake, bring this over, and we're gonna feed those studs through the bracket, and then slowly lower this down into position. Make sure there's no hoses or any harnesses caught underneath the intake. Now we can go ahead and start to install our studs for the intake, the upper intake, into the lower. And once you have all of these started, we can go ahead and gently snug them down. But there is a torquing sequence once we go to tighten these down, so do not over tighten them, you just want to get them seated. All right, let's go ahead and prepare to torque these down. Now I want to go ahead and torque down our upper intake bolts. There's 7 of them, and there is a certain pattern as well as a torque spec. Let's go ahead and do this now. We're going to torque them down to 7.4 foot-pounds. If you want to, go ahead and repeat that process one more time just to make sure everything is snug. Let's go ahead and install the 10mm nuts on the driver's side of the engine here. You want to thread those on as far as you can by hand. And then once you have them bottomed out, we'll go ahead and come back and snug them down with our gear wrench. And once that bottoms out, just snug it down. Doesn't have to be super tight, but you do want to make sure that it's tight. So it's bottomed out. Give it a good quarter turn. Now once you have those 2 nuts tight, we can go ahead and install our hose here. Just a plastic clip. It just pops right on. Right here. Push that on. And then right here. On the passenger side, we go ahead and line up our bracket here. I'm going to go ahead and get these two 10mm nuts started. I am not going to tighten them because we have to get the stud installed on the lower back side of this bracket. So we want to make sure that that bracket is flexible. Go ahead and grab that stud, make sure that the washer side is going to be facing inward. Go ahead and get that lined up down below, and we're going to start that a few threads by hand. I'm going to go ahead and thread that in as far as I can. It's going to make it easier once I get that socket on there. And once that's bottomed out, I'm just going to snug it gently. And then I'm going to switch over and I'm going to use my 10mm and tighten up the nuts up top. Once that snugs, that's all you need to do. Repeat for the other one. Once you have the bracket installed, we can now start to get all of our other components in place. Install the upper hose on the back of the intake. Get this in place. Press the upper vacuum hose on there. Now we can run our harness. Now our plastic mounting tab over here, ours broke. It is not the end of the world. I'm simply going to remove the old plastic. Now if yours popped off nice and easy, go ahead and insert that in. Run our components where they need to go. I'm simply going to run a little plastic wire strap here. And this is simply just to keep the harness anchored. You don't have to install this, but if you do feel that you want to do that, this is a good alternative way to go. It doesn't have to be super tight. It's just to hold it in place. And I'm going to cut off the excess. Go ahead and press your little harness onto the intake, and then you can go ahead and get your connector in place here. For your map sensor, you're going to hear it and feel it snap into place. Then you have your throttle body. Install the connector, push it on. You're going to hear it and feel it snap in. Now, if you have your red securing clip there, you want to go ahead and push that in. Just a lock. Ours is locked now. And then press your harness retainer on. Let's go ahead and install our air intake. You want to make sure that the rubber gasket around here is fully seated onto the intake unit. And then over here, there's a leg that comes down. There's a rubber grommet that fits into a stud down below. So let's go ahead and wiggle this onto the throttle body and then line up that grommet and push that down into place. While we're here, we can go ahead and install our sensor connector right here. Line that up. Push it on, you're going to feel it and hear it snap into place. Let's go to the other end by the air filter box. Line this up, work this into place. Let's go ahead and snug down our hose clamps. Just snug that down gently, and then back to the throttle body side. Go ahead and do the same over here. Go ahead, snug that down. Give that a little wiggle, make sure it's nice and secure. Install the engine cover. You want to make sure that all the rubber grommets are installed before popping this on to the top. If they're not on the cover, they're probably still on top of the engine. You want to go ahead and locate those, pop them back into the lid, and then get this into place. I like to reach underneath the lid, locate the grommets, then lower this down, push it down. You can feel all four that pop into place, and then you're good to go.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.